funny because the US celebrates Thanksgiving middle of last week, and it's not something that we in England really dwell on. We do have a harvest festival earlier on in the year, but other than that, there's no real time for sharing with family outside of, you know, sort of Christmas. There's no focus, there's no pseudo-religious focus, certainly for it, outside of Christmas and Easter, when really we should be thinking about other things. But it's funny because this last couple of days has been a very pleasurable and one would say almost intense time of joy, really, with me and my family. And all of it has happened by accident, as these things usually do. We started yesterday, in fact, when I went round to my parents'. Now, I went round to my parents primarily to do some washing and to talk to one of my sisters who was supposed to be there. But things turned out a little differently from planned. I ended up waiting about an hour for anyone else to arrive, and once they did arrive, they had planned on ordering, you know, food and stuff like that. So it ended up being a family occasion, because I was there, my sister Rosie and her husband-to-be, Tom, were there, and of course both my parents were there as well. And then usually what happens is that on a Sunday, my sister and I go to church, and then we either have lunch together with my parents, or I come back in the evening and have an evening meal with my parents on their own. Now, my parents were supposed to be going out this afternoon to a concert in Leeds, so they said they couldn't host us. Now, recently, ever since my nan has moved up to Harrogate, which was the start of October, she too has joined us for lunch or dinner. So she said, why couldn't she host us for dinner instead? So I thought that was a very good idea. So me, Rosie and Tom went round to hers, and we had a lovely dinner in her nice new flat, which was very nice. And then it started to snow, and it's funny because we all laughed at her at first when she was saying, "Look, the roads are going to get bad. You know, perhaps we ought to, you know, you ought to be heading off," because Rosie and Tom, of course, have to go back to Leeds, and they don't actually live in Harrogate. And we were like, no, everything's fine. The snow's not settling. So we had a drink afterwards, and by that time the snow was beginning to settle. So we all decided that we'd go our own separate ways. So I walked back to my home. I had been given some leftover cheesecake, which we didn't manage to finish between the four of us. Rosie and Tom walked from my nan's back to my parents', and then left for Leeds. Anyway, so I was thinking, well, you know, it's been rather unfortunate that I haven't managed to see my sister Tiffany at all this weekend. So I thought, well, I've got a bit of cheesecake, why don't I pack that in a bag and head out? You know, it gives me an excuse to walk in the snow, and it's actually okay walking in the snow because it's not ice yet here. It hasn't frozen properly, basically. So you're still trudging. The hardest bit is when you come out and then you sort of defrost. That's when you get cold and wet, you see. So I thought, well, I'll take this round to my sister Tiffany's. I couldn't raise her on the phone, but that's not unusual. I thought perhaps she had gone out and got caught in the bad weather as well. And I thought then if I couldn't get any response from being outside their house, I would go on to my parents to collect my my washing, because I had by then heard from my parents to say that they had decided not to go to York to the concert because of such bad weather, and they were frightened about driving in it, but more so the fact that the whole of Harrogate had come to a standstill. In fact, my sister Rosie, who was on her way back to Leeds, never made it out of Harrogate. She had been in the car for, I don't know, maybe 2.5 hours. well, maybe 3.5 hours before they actually decided, to abandon it and walk home. Because they just couldn't. There was the roads weren't moving, so they parked somewhere. They'd already decided to try and come back home at that point in the car, and then of course they walked back. I only discovered that when I got to my sister Tiffany's. Now, I knocked on her door and there was no response, so I was about to go round onto my parents when they appeared. They'd apparently decided they didn't want to miss fun in the snow, and they'd been for a walk. So it was brilliant timing. So we got in there, and that's when we discovered what had happened, with Rosie. So the long and short of it then was that Tiffany had to get boots in case she had to walk into work the next day. We also had an iPhone for charger for Rosie's phone, which was running out wherever she was. So we decided that we would walk around to Mother's. So me, Tiffany and Paul all walked round. Meanwhile, Rosie and Tom were also walking across the town, having abandoned their car. And we all met at Mother's. And they, of course, were there because they hadn't gone out of the snow either. So, and we were there for quite some time, sort of sharing snow stories and sort of providing one another with whatever we needed. Now, Tiffany and Paul have gone back to theirs, I've gone back to mine. Rosie and Tom are thinking now that the roads are a bit clearer and the gritters are out, that they will probably go salvage their car and probably try and make the attempt to go to Leeds. If it's too bad, I think they're going to get the train tonight, but it's quite early in the evening, so they've still got time to sort that out, plenty of time to sort that out. But I thought I'd share that with you because it was like a sort of my Thanksgiving moment, I suppose. Enjoying time with my family, which, I do. I love them dearly, but sometimes it's quite hard, A, to see them all in the same place, and B, sometimes there are issues that sort of spoil it. But this was one of those, perfect times where, by total accident, we all ended up excitedly in one place and sort of enjoyed ourselves. So, that's been a real highlight for me, having been off this last week. And of course, when I've been back here, I've had my Caligas heater, which arrived last weekend when I started my holiday, just in time to save me from the cold of all this snow. Now, of course, the only other thing is that tomorrow I'm getting rid of my baby birds except for Dane. And I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what happened with Nisa's chicks as well. Now, believe it or not, this little thing which looks very much like it's dead is keeping heat. Okay, first he's keeping heat, secondly he's growing, and thirdly, if I just sort of, there we are, he is actually very, very much alive. This is the only surviving chick of Nisa and Levon, who doesn't look, if you can see at the bottom, doesn't look like he has a crop. He spent a long time in the egg, so possibly he is actually able to process food without one. I don't know. I thought he would be dead by this time, I really did. But he is still alive, he's still moving. I don't know how old he is, I've forgotten, maybe 4 days old. I don't know what is going to happen to him, whether he will survive or not, but this is him so far. You can see he's a absolute little fighter. Is this guy here, an absolute little fighter? Yes, you are. And he's keeping heat, but I am going to put him back inside his nest now, so that he can possibly get some more food. My worry with him is that because he doesn't have a crop, the food's going straight into his stomach before he can digest it, and he will eventually sort of, I suppose, die from that, so I don't know. But here's hoping.